Hi, Josh. Welcome to the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
My pleasure indeed. Really looking forward to hearing your story. I know you started, founded, grew, and ultimately exited at Core Systems, which, for those listening, is involved in software. And I won't get too far ahead of our story here, but as those who listen to the show regularly know, we love software. We love what's going on in that space. It has its ups and downs, but it's an exciting area and it's really growing. And certainly an opportunity for entrepreneurs and founders to build amazingly valuable companies too. So, Josh, before we sort of get into that, maybe I could kick over to you. You could give us a little bit of your background and kind of what led to you starting that business.
Yeah, sure. So most of my background was in the engineering space. So went through information security, worked for a lot of information security firms here in the States, in the US, and started to grow into a sales and marketing role with one of those organizations that I was with. So when I transitioned over to sales and marketing, I started getting more into the CRM side, the software side of the house, because I was a sales engineer for a CRM consulting firm. And so that led me into that sales and marketing side.
Interesting. And just for the uninitiated here, like what do you mean by an information security company? I mean, is that cyber security or is it something else?
Yeah, so cybersecurity. So my background was in endpoint security, web application security, securing networks and applications. So heavy on the technology side in that space.
Yeah, interesting. It feels like every second day, these days somebody else has been hacked, right? It's just
Oh yeah.
certainly in Australia we had a couple of really big cases in the last sort of 3-4 months, and I saw overnight, I think it was PayPal had 35,000 users got hit, and I guess this is the new world we live in.
Right. Yeah, that's just the case. I mean, the attack vectors and everything, there's just all kinds of ways to try and get into a system now. And,
Yeah.
the information security professionals have their work cut out for them. And it creates a good opportunity, I think, for software and, businesses to be built as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Now I know Atcore was involved a lot in CRMs, and I want to get to that because I've been a big believer. I sort of came up through the sales channels as well. So CRMs to me have always been a part of my life. Back in the day when we were building things on Access and stuff like that, it
Yeah.
was kind of, I mean, functionality was there, for the core things you wanted to do. But geez, it was a different world back then. So,
Right.
but when did when did Atcore start? And were you the sole founder? Did you have partners? What did those early days look like?
Yeah, so I founded it as the sole owner at that time, and the early days were I did sales engineering for a CRM consulting firm prior to that, Sugar CRM.
Yep.
And so they made some transitions and said, "Hey, we're going to go sell through this partner network." And I had the opportunity to become one of those partners. And
Cool.
I had had companies before. I'd been in and out of entrepreneurship, had some corporate jobs, things like that in the past. And I said, "Yeah, this looks good. I want to take the partnership route
Yeah.
and be one of those service providers on that platform." So
Interesting.
broke out and started doing consulting on the platform.
So that's really interesting. On one hand, as the outsider looking in here, on one hand, you're kind of committing to their system and their platform, which some might say limits your ability to do lots of different things. But on the other hand, it also perhaps de-risks some of their sort of entry into your own business. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pros and cons to it, which we can talk about, in the exit portion. But the pros, I call it brand piggybacking. I just spoke to
Yeah.
a entrepreneur group on this last week, but I call it brand piggybacking. Right? They've taken the money, they're doing all the marketing, and you can become part of their ecosystem to get your services company off the ground a lot faster, right? Or you can take
Yeah.
an existing services company and grow a lot faster by being part of another ecosystem.
Yeah.
Now, whether it's the right ecosystem, large enough, small enough for what you're going for, can have some impact, exit later and the
Mhm.
opportunities you have.
Yeah.
But yeah, it provided a tremendous opportunity for me at the time, to be part of that ecosystem and to scale up faster. And it provides, a number of different benefits as opposed to just starting yourself and not being in a set ecosystem.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask, like, being part of an ecosystem like that, and I love the term brand piggybacking because it's a
Mhm.
it's a good definition of it, really. But in that environment, were there any restrictions on kind of bolt-on products or services that you could offer your clients?
For that group, we didn't find that there was really any limitations for us. I mean, it was a
Mhm.
growing market, and what we find is when you piggyback on a brand like that, they want you to help build more. They want you to go build the integration. So, like our organization, this was early Twitter days. We were the first one to do a Twitter integration with the platform.
Nice.
So it didn't exist. There wasn't one.
Yeah.
So we were kind of leading the pack. We were the company who actually built the integration to Mailchimp, and that was one of our number one integrations. So I think just given the ecosystem we were in, they knew that integrations and the bolt-ons and the other things that we did added to the value of the
Yeah.
community. And so we didn't really feel any restrictions from that. And I think, that
Yeah.
varies based on, who you're partnering up with and who you're piggybacking on, I think.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Gosh, so many questions come to mind because I've been through this process a few times. But when you build those integrations, does that kind of IP, does that then get shared with the network of other providers, or is that your IP and only used with your clients, or like, what sort of happens with that kind of specialized work you do?
Yeah, so all of the IP was ours, and so we owned that intellectual property. And then what we did was there was a third party market that would
Mhm.
also carry and resell add-ons. So, if you think about it almost like nowadays, if you have an Apple device, you go to the App Store and you get the add-on you want, right? You add the
Yes.
software. Very similar in the CRM space, and a lot of software now has a marketplace. The top vendors have a marketplace.
Yep.
So there's already agreements in place for how that marketplace interacts with the rest of the community and the ecosystem and how those get sold. But ultimate ownership was on us from an intellectual property perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you
Yeah.
get to get some upside protection there as well. But it's yeah, that's interesting. I realize I've sort of jumped ahead and we've already used a bit of jargon and terminology here.
Yeah.
It's there's probably a few people listening who go, "What is a CRM?" I mean, to you and me is sometimes still surprising that it's kind of still new terminology for some people. But maybe you could take us through what is a CRM, how does it work, and how did it specifically relate to the work you were doing?
Sure. So, most companies have a CRM, customer relationship management. Most companies have a database of all of their names and contacts and accounts and deals that they're using to run sales and marketing, and oftentimes portions of operations. So, the easiest way to think of it is it's a database that houses these contacts, companies, and deals for the sales and marketing teams to maintain and build relationships with prospects and clients.
Yeah.
Now, there's lots of other uses. So to put it into context, and a lot of people don't know this, but they're highly customizable and configurable. So what you do is CRMs have actually expanded out to become platforms to build the business on. And so with something like a Salesforce, right, there's not much you can't do with it as a platform to run your company. So there's companies like ours, or the ones that I had, where we do consulting on it and we build that out based on the needs of the business.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and so I guess for anyone who's perhaps a little bit more old school, and it's funny because I had a couple of clients just in the last 2 years, we kind of pushed them to get our CRM. They were 30, 40 million turnover companies and they weren't managing client relationships other than, oh, well, that's the sales guy and he kind of does that and he has his own list. And I sat there and honestly, if I had hair, I probably would have pulled it out because I'm like, how can you run a business like this? Like, it's just insane. Um, But for anyone who's a little bit old school and listening to this, like it's okay if you're in that situation, right? And
Right.
I also think anyone who's a bit of an old school sales manager will relate to this, where they've looked at their team, and if you've got a team of salespeople, it's whether it's 3 or 5 or 50, where you look at the team and there's always going to be some star performers, there's always going to be some people who struggle, and there's salespeople who are missing out of the office or whatever, and you're wondering what the hell are these people doing? How do we actually track and manage and monitor and know that these guys and girls are delivering and doing what they're meant to be doing? And by the way, how can we actually define what success looks like, right? And so, unless you're looking at the behaviors of successful salespeople and being able to break it down to a task level and the communication level, then how do you actually know what to train the next person on? And so, for us as a sales manager, and one point in time, I had a team of over 30 people, and if you're not using systems to manage those people, like you just can't do it. You just can't get across all of the information that you need to. So
Yeah.
fascinating, and a mission critical system, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely mission critical, especially if you're a growing company.
Yeah, for sure. Now, just with CRMs, and I don't want to get too technical today because it's more about kind of hearing your journey and story. But the thing that I guess has blown me away over the last, I'm going to say sort of 10 years, but even more so the last 5 years, is how marketing automation has now just been built into CRMs. Okay, sometimes they're an add-on or a bolt-on, and you're doing integrations like you talked about before, but fundamentally bringing sales and marketing together to create what I refer to often as a revenue machine. I'm
Yeah.
always sort of talking to business owners who want to sell their company one day. And when I explain to them that a buyer is buying your future stream of profit and they're looking for a system that generates money, right? Hey, we turn this dial or pull this lever and more money spits out the other end. And that's a lovely simplistic way of putting it. We all know it's a lot
Right.
more complicated than that, but you know, the best way to describe, your system is to show them you have a system, that you've got a way of generating leads, that it's not just people running around trying to hopefully bump into people and build relationships and sell something to them. It's you have a model, it is trackable, you've got data, you know conversion levels and the cost of your acquisition of customers and what the lifetime value of your customers are. And by the way, if you're hearing some of this terminology and saying, what does he mean by that? Then maybe give me a call or certainly Google it. But this is stuff you need to know, right? But geez, this has evolved so much over the last number of years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're seeing more and more of those features get combined into one platform. And we're also seeing that salespeople are having to, you know, take their level of sophistication and knowledge of using those tools in order to even compete.
Yeah,
Nowadays it's getting to where, SDR, sales development reps, are using tools to send out sequences, and it's automatic, right? You're not keeping a sheet and writing down who you need to follow up with anymore. It's automatically doing that.
yes,
And the challenge we see is it becomes harder to compete if you're not using the tools, because that
yeah,
person over there is getting 60 a day done, and your person doing it the old school way is getting 10 done.
absolutely.
Now that's if, holding all things constant, the person doing 60 is going to win.
Yep.
So there's just different challenges where we're seeing more and more of that automation built into the tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other part to that whole automation piece that I love, and you're right, like there's the quantity or the volume aspect to it, but there's also the qualitative aspect. Anyone who's ever had to do sales in their life of any form, by the way, understands the importance of timing. Timing in the market, timing in front of the client, striking while the iron's hot. I can come up with a million different cliches for this, but ultimately, when a customer takes some form of action, right? Often that's a buying signal, and as we all know,
Right.
a buyer could be hot for an hour or two before they start cooling off. And if you wait till the next day to contact them, they might be busy, they could be distracted, that something else has popped up, that they're no longer in that frame of mind where if you had captured them in that moment, they probably would have acquired what you're selling. And so, you know, I, I've seen some really intricate systems that are, they're sharing videos and contents, and they're saying, okay, only of this 3 minute video, only if somebody watches more than 1 minute and 45 seconds, I want you to email them with this. And then if they haven't watched that, email them something else. And it's fascinating for me to sort of see both the psychology and the level of sort of thinking that's gone into that automation to get better results than their competitors.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in the way of marketing automation tools nowadays, and they continue to get easier to use. They continue to come down market from like a pricing perspective, where there's very
Uh,
easy entry level ways to utilize that. And like
yep.
you said, I mean, the software is automatically segmenting people. If I fill in a
Yeah.
form and I fill out industry A or industry B, I'm going to get the stream of content from that industry, and
Yeah.
all of that's dripping, it's staying in front of that prospect or that client, whatever it might be, all while you're sleeping. Like you said, you want to build the machine, whether you're at your desk, whether you remember to follow up, whether your sales team remembers, like it's just automatically happening. So
Yeah.
we're seeing just more and more of that with all the technology that's out there. So again,
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
harder for the old school style to compete at some, in some ways.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah, completely agree. Um, I had no intention of actually talking about this necessarily today, but I've got to ask you now. What are your thoughts around things like ChatGPT and AI and how that, what kind of role that's going to play in marketing and sales automation for the future?
Yeah. So what we're seeing is we've been using, there's all the tools you mentioned. There's also like Jasper AI. We've been playing with that a lot in my new firm, and I think the role it's going to play is it's really going to change the dynamic in that you will be able to create and generate the text that you need a lot quicker and
Yeah.
easier and as it gets smarter, it'll do more and more. So like I explained it like this the other day, we haven't used it to generate an entire blog. We don't, blog posts. We don't think it's quite on point. It's not on brand.
Mm.
But if I want to do a blog post on the top 10 things you need to know about CRM, I can have it generate a list of 15 and pick the top 10 that I like out of it. And it does it in a half a second. And all of a sudden, I don't even have to come up with them.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is, I think for the next few years, it's going to be an accelerator for the people who know how to use it.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's just going to do everything for you. I think they're going to offset some of that. Google and some other people are going to offset like the impacts of some of that, but it's an accelerator. So it's going to look at the information and be able to predict and write for you. Or, like we're talking about sales, there's tools now where it just looks at your communication and it's going to auto generate an email back to
Yeah.
that person. And it may be 80% correct. And you can edit it, in a few seconds and send it out. So
Yeah.
we're just seeing it's an accelerator right now to the work that we have to do.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. Once again, for those listening who might be saying, "What the hell is Chat GPT?" Um, basically, it's, and I'm going to do a bad job of explaining this, but it's basically artificial intelligence. It's online. You can have a Chrome, extension and stuff like that. So everyone's used to doing a Google search, but this thing can give you far more defined answers. You can ask more specific questions. And so, to Josh's point, you can actually type in there, what are the top 15 issues or selling points or whatever around CRM systems, and it will rattle it off. We've been doing some testing with it for content on our side. And not that you would copy it straight across because that's copyright as well, but it's there's ideas and things you can play with. And we've even done stuff like, hey, give us an explanation of this topic, or how would you write about this topic, including the 5 top things, and include this quote from James Clear. And off it goes. And it writes this
Oh yeah.
thing, and it is written so damn well that and we even wrote in there. It wasn't me. It was Shanti, our marketing director. But it goes, could you rewrite this and make it more conversational? Yeah, sure. Brrr, off it goes. We're like, holy moly, this thing is just phenomenal. So if you're hearing this and you haven't heard about ChatGPT, get online and start having a look at it, because this is the world changing in front of your eyes. It's often the world changes at a very slow pace, a little bit like watching grass grow. But this thing is going to move quickly, and it's going to change things fairly quickly, in my view. Yeah, it is just amazing. And to think Google's investing, I mean, not Google, sorry, Microsoft is investing
Yep.
billions of dollars into OpenAI, which runs ChatGPT, and they're saying we're doing this because we're going to integrate AI into our products. So, I think it is good to at least have an awareness of this stuff and understand how it might impact your world.
Yeah, and there's so many ways that it's having an impact, and I think a lot of that's just moving faster and faster.
Yeah,
And we have to look at that. What was IP today, or what is IP today, may not be IP tomorrow if somebody can
yeah,
crank that out, right? When you look at inbound marketing as a concept, I mean,
yeah,
all the articles you write for inbound, all the work that you do, and something can go, if you feed it right, it'll generate the majority of that. It's a game changer, right? So
yeah,
that means
yeah,
we have to adjust as marketers, as salespeople, as business owners to understand what's coming ahead. What do we think if that replaces what we've done? What's the next thing? How
Yeah.
are the dynamics changing?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of content marketing agencies out there at the moment going, "Oh, geez, I think our business model is about to be disrupted." So, which in a way, actually, it's sort of when you think about the last 5 years of marketing, both Google and Facebook and everybody has been saying to anyone who'll listen, video is the future. You need to be
Right,
doing more video, and we're
right.
going to favor video in our algorithms and all this sort of stuff. And I think that's logical. I think the value of a blog article probably is diminished in a lot of people's minds, or at least the platform's minds, when it can just be generated by another computer, right? It's how much is this is your content? Are you really the subject matter expert? Should we preference you in listings over others if you're just getting a computer to give the answer? So I do think it's really interesting. I think it'll change SEO as a channel of marketing as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I was sharing basically the similar assessment the other day with somebody. I said, if all of this can be auto generated, the next thing, it's hard to auto generate video. Now we're doing deep fakes, we're doing AI video and stuff now, but
Yeah,
it is tough. It, Gary V, it's going to be hard to replicate that person on stage authentically in a video with AI for a while, right? So
sure.
hopefully you have another 5 or 10 years, and you just need to know that video is going to trump probably the written word, right? It's going to be
Yeah,
higher value than the written word, from a marketing perspective, just because it's going to be unique and authentic. So,
yeah,
what's
yeah.
next? Who knows? But
Yeah.
it's coming.
It makes me wonder whether business life as always goes in cycles, right? It makes me wonder post COVID era changing scenario. I wonder how much more in person events and workshops and things like that will start to whether they'll be start to become more popular as people look for a more engaging and authentic experience.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the interesting things in kind of being in the marketing space now is that when we look at like sub $5 million companies, especially in B2B, especially professional services, when you go talk to those founders, the majority of their deals are still done through relationships.
Yeah,
So no matter how much we hype up all the different marketing tactics, the social media, the Facebook advertising, the GPT chats, all of those, you go to a sub $5 million B2B services founder, I'm betting 90% of their revenue came from a relationship.
yeah,
It came from meeting somebody, it came from a referral. And so
yeah,
it's interesting to really look at, what is happening out in the market, but what's really driving revenue based on the size of the company. And those are very different dynamics, right? Perception versus reality.
yeah.
It's not saying that we don't need one or the other, but we do have to recognize that as founders. Where is it really coming from?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Yeah, and it's I guess too like all marketing, and even if you break down a typical sales process, having really great widgets and wonderful marketing doesn't mean more sales, right? We know that, but it does it's meant to sell the next step, right? The marketing might allow you to get in front of somebody and have a conversation where you didn't before. Doesn't mean they'll buy from you. It's earned you the right to take one more step with them, right? And that's where
Right.
that relationship piece is takes it from you're in the game to taking you across the finish line and getting you a deal. So it's fascinating stuff. I just love all this. I think the principles of human beings and the way we engage hasn't necessarily changed. The foundations. It's just how we go about doing things generally. It's how those things are facilitated. I guess is has moved so much in the last sort of 5 to 10 years. So yeah,
Yeah, I
interesting
mean,
stuff.
in the B2B space, I mean, we see it as a great way to initiate a conversation, right? Like
Yeah,
marketing is supposed to initiate the beginning of a conversation. If you think it's almost like a dating app, right? Like it connects people and initiates a conversation, but you probably still have to actually go on that date. Maybe somebody much younger is doing it on Zoom or something. I don't know,
yeah,
but
yeah,
eventually you probably got to go on the date. And I feel like at least in the B2B space, that's very common, right? There's a
yeah,
high expectation that marketing's going to practically close the deal for you. I'm like, actually, it's just
yeah.
trying to get that one opening. It's trying to help you get one opening to then show up and talk to somebody on a one-to-one human to human level.
For
Then the deal
sure.
gets closed.
Yeah, yeah. We have a friend of ours who she's been on a dating app, and it's been as somebody who's been married for many many years. My wife and I are sort of like fascinated by this whole like, wow, really, like, is that how it all works these days? Like, we started dating when the internet had only just been born, and it was like, so. But
Right.
it's funny how the marketing part plays out, right? Because she was saying how, oh yeah, all the guys, they've always got photos of them either skiing or mountain climbing or something, and when they turn up for the date, they're often quite different to their persona,
Right.
online. It's like, oh, great marketing, but just delivery was poor.
Right. Right.
Oh, anyway, so
Yeah,
um,
I'm on the same. We're in the same kind of path, I guess. I've been married for a long time now, and I don't remember there being dating apps, so
yeah, yeah,
don't even know
yeah.
what that's like. Like, oh, that's an interesting story. How did that happen? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I know. It just sort of the mind boggles a bit, but yeah. Anyway, funny stuff. That's life. But yeah. So Josh, hopefully people got a good understanding of the kind of stuff you were doing there, and I want to jump back into Atcore here because correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you founded in 2007. You said, is that right?
Yeah, roughly. I think
Okay.
2009 officially. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, well, I always say to people too, when we started out business, the first year or so, you're kind of scrambling and trying to work out what the hell you're doing and probably more importantly, what you're not doing, right? You got to learn
Right.
what to say no
Definitely.
to. But so I know you exited in 2016. Talk to me about that journey. You started the business, you're on your own. Getting first customers is always a trial, first employees. Talk to me a bit about that sort of growth journey.
Sure. So, I mean, it was an excellent ride. We had, in those early days, you got like 4 and 3 digit growth numbers year over year, which was really fun. So we were doing great in the early days. We were working through the channel and the partners and ecosystems and doing a lot of subcontract work to get off the ground. And so early journey was a blast, a lot of hard work, a lot of late evenings. A few years in, we had kind of our worst year, right? So we got used to everything going smooth, I think. And then, boom, you have that first big learning year that doesn't go so well. So we had a big setback that year, learned lots of lessons, about the team and how to grow.
Was that tough year? Was it an external factor? Was it what would you put that result down to, or was it a bunch of factors?
Yeah, I would say a number of things happen, but at the core, I have this hypothesis that, you know, as a founder of a company, every challenge, if you're a growing founder, right? Let's say you're just growing on average 20% a year. If you're growing every year to some degree, every challenge is harder, more expensive, and more complex than the last. And so I think what maybe I got into the rhythm of is, you can use the similar solution, right? I just learned this, but how will this translate? Everything gets bigger, the numbers get bigger, the zeros, there gets more zeros behind. So when you do have a loss, um, just I guess inadvertently, there's more zeros behind the impact,
Yeah.
which can set you back very quickly. So I don't know that there was one core reason that it happened.
Mm.
I think it was more just learning how to grow a business. This Atcore was my first multi-million-dollar business.
Yep.
I think before that, my biggest company had maybe been 400,000 US.
Yep.
Um, and so a lot of it was just learning,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's use the analogy. Really, regardless of how good you are and how good your business is, you're still a small boat in a very large ocean. And when the large macro picture wave comes, you're going to feel it, right? Doesn't matter how
Yeah,
good you are, how
definitely.
specialized you are, how this, how that. Like it has its impact, and an impact might be different for different companies. But yeah, it's that macro environment is the ultimate driver of whether there's opportunities in the market for you or not. Um, so it's an interesting one. Um, how big did your team get by the time you exited?
I think the largest we were ever at was maybe 15.
Yep.
Yeah, and that ebbed and flowed, again, a
Yeah.
lot of lessons on how to hire, how to filter people, how to assess people for, to hire them. It always, I would say it's kind of scary how many people we might have churned through, over about 9 years.
Yep.
There's lots of lessons learned. You think just because maybe you worked in another corporate environment and you showed up and you were one of the team members on the hiring team doing the interviews, that you'd be really good at that. But yeah, there's a lot more to everything, right? And maybe that goes back to your earlier question, like what was the crux of it? What gave us the down year is, when you own and run the company, you really have to be or become the expert at everything in the early days.
Yeah.
You have to know how to deliver the work, do the work, sell the work, market, HR, finance. If any of that slips, it's ultimately on you
Yeah.
as the owner.
Yeah. And that feeds into something I'm seeing a lot of at the moment. We've had COVID, we've had all these issues, people out there growing their businesses. I was chatting to a friend of mine actually, and she's based in Colorado. And we were talking about, we've got a similar business to our exit advisory group. And, we've been friends for about 5 years and we always share ideas, right? And a while ago, they kind of went down this path of bringing on more employees and less contractors. And in fact, even switching contractors to employees. And it was driven around, there was some legal stuff around whether you're deemed an employee or not, and that's fair enough.
Right.
But I think the more strategic thinking behind it was employees tend to be more committed. They more this is a really bad word to use, but sort of indoctrinated into the way we like to do things.
Right.
And you get on board the train, and everybody's kind of singing from the same hymn book, so to speak, and that can generate more value in a business as it's growing because, people are more focused on that. It's not just about, hey, I'm a contractor. I turn up and do the thing that you're paying me to do, and then I'm out. You get zero discretionary effort from me because you don't pay me for discretionary effort. And so they went down that path. I must admit it with our business, we've kind of pulled both levers, a few employees, a few contractors, stuff like that. But I always see this sort of really interesting mix here because the contractors give you that sort of accordion style flexibility as the market moves, which for me is a really important business with sort of 12 people in the team. When you're a global company with 50,000 employees, well, you've usually got a bit of extra fat on the bone. You can kind of handle the ebbs and flows of those markets a little bit better. So
right.
I don't know, do you have any thoughts generally? And how did you run your business? Did you use both employees and contractors, or what did you found worked the best for you?
Yeah, so in at-core systems, we've done it a lot of different ways then and differently now even, but in at-core systems specifically, we were that company that really wanted full-time in-office committed people, right? And this was up to 2016 until the exit, so pre-COVID. So yeah, we were all about full-time and we got people in and we wanted to really have a culture of people that wanted to be around each other, wanted to collaborate, and how do we build that culture up? And so yeah, that was full time. And then we had our group of developers, which was our office. It wasn't through another company, but we had a group of 6 developers in our Belgrade, Serbia office.
Okay.
And so we had those 2 teams. So we had our headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia in the US, and then our Belgrade office. And that offset certain challenges because the Belgrade office could add engineers at a more cost-effective rate, but still very compatible culturally with what we were doing here in the US.
Yep.
And so we balanced it out that way in that company.
Yeah, interesting. And I think we're seeing so much more of that these days, right? I mean, I know for us, we've got a small team in the Philippines because the time zone works, right? But there's the cultural element. I think the Western influence there just makes that whole communication piece so much easier, and it just makes a lot of sense. Talk me through a little bit. This idea of exiting, right? I mean, exit in 2016. When did exiting start coming into your thinking? Like, where on that journey?
Well, the first bout was that year that we had a really bad year.
Yep.
And I was like, forget this. I'm done. Like the whole thing's imploding, right? I've never been through it. Not to that level.
Yeah.
And so we actually went out and talked to 3 different people, which I would never recommend, right? You never sell down.
Yeah.
But we started talking to a few people and they gave me some numbers, and that really just motivated me to double down. I'm like, all right, if that's all this is going to be, I'm going to double down and work harder. And the next year we had our, the most profitable year in business up until that point. So the double down worked.
Yep.
A little bit later, we just started seeing some market consolidation where we were at, and with the ecosystem we were in and with the partnership we had. And there was just other things that were happening in that ecosystem where we said, I think it's time that we start talking to other partners to see if we can merge, if we can get acquired. And one of those partners reached out and was like, hey, if you're ever thinking about this, I was like, actually, I just started thinking about it. Let's have that conversation. If you're thinking about the exit, if you're thinking about what you want to do next, I was like, actually, I am. So we started to have that conversation. So it wasn't quite as intentional as I would be this round.
Yep.
Like you said earlier, I think there needs to be a plan. You need to be intentional. You need to have a date and really drive to those goals. But it started happening within about a year.
Yeah. Interesting.
Of when we sold.
And it's funny how many transactions do come around from that sort of proverbial tap on the shoulder, right? It's and I think it makes sense if you're a business owner. It makes sense for you to just be aware of what's going on in the environment, right? It's there can be transactions going on around you, and you're not even if you're not aware of them happening, then geez, your entire market landscape could change on you. But you could be missing a good opportunity for you personally.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. So talk me a little bit through the process you went through. So they started a conversation. How long did that go? Did you hire advisors? How long did it take? Where did money start coming into play? What did that
So luckily, I'm in an organization called Entrepreneur Organization, and it's 14,000 members worldwide. So because of that, I could ask other entrepreneurs that had done transactions. And, one of the early things was let's get the money piece out of the way. I don't want to spend the next month giving you information to find out that we're just going to get, lowballed and we're not even in the same ballpark. And that's where it falls apart. Yeah. So I found that, a lot of the experience I've heard is that people, they bury that till the end where you're already kind of committed, and then they come in with an offer, It's like, I'm not going through that. So, I think we got a letter of intent, a LOI, pretty quickly. And, it felt like within 90 days we were having, almost to the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
So, 0 to 90 days from LOI, started passing over, materials and, doing the NDAs, passing over books and other, materials.
Yep.
And going through that process.
Yeah, interesting. You're so right about that process. I've ended up with a lot of clients who went through that process. They got approached, there was an offer, they get dragged through this big long-winded due diligence, and sort of 6 to 9 months later, they feel like I've given you everything. And then they either get lowballed because the buyer knows they're just so committed to the process and have already spent the money mentally.
Right.
Or the buyer literally changes strategy and goes, hey, listen, we're out. We're really sorry, but different corporate strategy. Or I saw once where they said, we've got a new CEO and they've put a freeze on all M&A for 18 months. It's like, wow, hang on a minute. Like, I've just invested an enormous amount of money and time and effort into this process. So, I think we've ended up having people come to us saying, I'm super frustrated because I went down that path, and in the end, in many cases, they were only dealing with that one buyer, and so they had no competitive tension, no second backup options, and please correct me if you have a different view here, Josh, but you start pulling together all the information you need for due diligence. There's a lot of work, right?
And,
if you're going to show it
to a lot of work and a lot of things, you weren't prepared for and didn't have together already.
Yeah, right. And so, if you're going to go to all the effort to pull that together and share it with one potential party, you'd be mad not to go and potentially show it to others. And don't get me wrong. You may not have done that, Josh, but we've had certainly some clients who've gone, no, this is a good fit and we know it's working, and it's worked out beautifully for them. I guess I probably just end up talking to more that it didn't work out because they're looking for a new solution. But it's it can be hard.
Right.
It can be hard to assess, like how to approach that kind of decision point.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, in retrospect would, if I had to do it again, I would work with an organization that goes and puts that package together, does a little shopping ahead of time, even if we have one person, because what I found was once you get far enough in, you're signing, certain agreements saying that you're not going to shop it during the due diligence
Yeah,
period.
yeah,
There's other legal contracts that you're signing. So there is a window in which it's like, hey, do I have a backup plan? Do I feel comfortable that firm C or D would come to the table if these people try to do X,
yeah,
or Y, whatever tactic they try to do at the end to lowball or whatever
yeah,
else it is.
yeah.
So, I think working with an organization that puts that package together and does a little more shopping up front and validates, would always be helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Look, yeah, totally agree. I mean, at this risk of sounding self-serving there, but it's funny. We've been actually appointed in a process on a few occasions when people have had the tap on the shoulder and they've gone, "Oh, geez, we better get somebody in to help represent us." Like we're flat out with our day jobs. Um, and what was interesting, and I've seen this happen a number of times, is just the mere fact that they appointed us and advised the other side created the instant perception of competitive tension. I went, oh my goodness, okay. Oh, you've got advisors. Oh, you're going to be running. Oh, yes. Oh, you want to run your own process as well. Oh, okay. So it's not just us kind of cajoling you and
Right.
telling you what to do. You're going to come to the table kind of more prepared on this. And so their attitude shifted. They spoke very differently around the process. And so it was kind of just interesting seeing a shift in behavior, right? And it just goes to show perception is reality.
Right. To me, it's almost like a police show where you get pulled in for questioning, and the questioning's one line of question, and all of a sudden you're like lawyer, they bring the lawyer, and all of a sudden all the questions are completely different. You have this layer of protection,
Yeah, totally.
and so yeah, we didn't do that. I think it would have definitely been a better process, if we go at it again, or when we go at it again for an exit, we'll be much more diligent in pulling somebody in and having somebody represent us on that side.
Well,
Yeah.
hey, from my experience, Josh, it sounds like you did a pretty darn good job. I mean, 90 days to closure is good. And what I will say, what I don't want to paint all buyers as being kind of underhanded or trying to be too cunning and stuff like that. I mean, we've had amazing buyers, and in fact, talking about software, like we've done a number of transactions to some of the large software aggregators, and you would know all their names. We won't go all into it now, but and they've been real straight shooters. They do a lot of transactions. They yes, they do their homework to make sure they understand what they're potentially buying. But they're very straight shooters. They treat everyone with respect. They understand that time and poor communication kills deals. And so, they've been a dream to deal with. And I would like to think, and certainly from the feedback we've received, they've said the same from our end, right? Like it's, hey, like it's
Right.
about transparency. I've said this on this show a few times, is that deals only get done when you've got a willing buyer and a willing seller who can form a lot of trust in a very short period of time. And that means being open, honest, transparent, and understanding what you want and what you don't want. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
so, um, you mentioned that whole thing about offers changing. Did you get any kind of retrading in your deal later? Did they change their perspective, or did the original offer sort of stand?
Oh, no, I think ours went really well, and maybe it's good luck, maybe it's who we were dealing with, but I felt like the offer came in. I don't feel like it changed a lot. I think what happened too that built trust was this company had already done acquisitions of other similar companies like ours,
Yep.
and they're like, "Hey, here's the last three we did. They're within this range." So we had the ability to push a little bit for more. But when we looked at all the factors, it was like, okay, yeah, we negotiated back and forth a little bit, but there wasn't any last minute major issues. It was a very transparent conversation. At least we felt that way.
Yeah.
Um, And so I think that was really helpful, because I have other friends that have had exits, and they've had those last minute items where they're just like, you know what, just because you did that, this is done, and they just blow
Yeah.
the whole thing's done.
Wow.
So yeah, we did pretty good, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I think the old adage of trust your gut in these kind of things is important, right? Like if it feels like something's not right, even if you can't define what it is, you should probably explore that because, typically your gut's a pretty good indicator of whether things are going well
Right.
or not. Um, Out of interest, Josh, I don't know if you can share what your valuation was, but can you tell us a little bit about how the number was created? Was it a multiples of EBITDA or revenue, or how did they construct their number?
Yeah, so they found most of the valuation in the subscription revenue that we had,
Yep.
and there was a certain margin on that. So there was, a number placed on that margin, and it was kind of a multi-year. Let's say it was like 2 times EBITDA or something on some subscription revenue,
Yep.
some license revenue. Um, so ours was broken up as, a down payment in the form of like a six-figure check up front,
Yep.
and then we had 2 years, I think it was roughly 2 years of like an earnout period
Okay.
where certain tranches came in.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, so there was kind of multiples on different types of revenue
Yeah, makes
because
sense.
we had subscription revenue and then we had consulting revenue.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is in the CRM business, there's a lot of businesses like this, but the majority of the revenues made on the upfront project work in the first year during implementation. So there's not a lot of ongoing, I mean, there is ongoing revenue,
Yeah.
but proportion to the amount that company spends in the first year, it's significantly lower second and third year
Yep.
for most CRM implementations, at least at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we got two different valuations on the subscription revenue versus the consulting revenue.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting, and it's a good takeaway, I think, for anyone listening, is that, I think we all hear about software companies, pure SaaS companies selling at, huge, huge multiples. We sold one just last year that sold it for sort of 6 times their top line revenue.
Yeah.
We had other companies who have a SaaS product with some consulting as well. And like in your example, buyers looked at them very differently. They said, well, we'll use this methodology for the recurring sort of software based stuff and a different multiple for the project stuff. Um, I think even if you're not in the software game, there's a great takeaway here for businesses. Like if you're a purely project based business, and you do these big projects for those clients, and some of them do the odd extra project with you, but a lot of them don't. That kind of business won't get valued as highly as people who have either a really ongoing repeat customers, and of course subscription customers is the holy grail, right?
Right.
Like it's, you're locked into a contract, they have to pretty much tell you to stop charging them before you do. But repeat customers are obviously a nice in-between blend there where you can at least show history, right? Hey, this customer came in for this product or project 5 years ago and has consistently bought off us every year. I mean, coming back to what we said in the beginning of the show here, this machine that generates money, like there's consistency, right? There's data around it. There's proof that what you're doing has a stickiness to it, and fundamentally buyers value that at a higher level.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that every business owner should really look at is there's lots of great data out there on what the EBITDA multiples are for the majority of companies. And, I would highly recommend you get rid of all the inflated, newsworthy sells because those are so far and few between,
Yeah.
but there's numbers based on whether if you're project-based work, if you're SaaS, if you're consulting services, those multiples change based on how many millions in EBITDA per year you're pulling in.
Yeah.
So there's big changes there. And there's lots of little sheets I found where it says, these are the 6 things or the 12 things companies are looking at. And, that's something I've paid a lot more attention to in my new company where we do want to have an exit at a period, over a period of time. And so we are building it more intentionally for that exit so that we can say, okay, here's all the checks that we have, right?
Yeah.
Here's how this works. Even the professional services revenue is productized. It's on an annual subscription.
Yeah.
Here's our renewal rate. Here's our churn rate. So we're really we've come a long way in analyzing that and deciding, to build the company around
Yeah.
what people value.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How do we shape our business model to drive
Yeah.
more value in the end? I think that's a smart approach. And look, sometimes you learn it by experience, right? Like you see firsthand
Right.
what you should or shouldn't do, what worked, what didn't work, and all the rest. For those listening, if you'd like a bit of a checklist around what buyers do look for, we'll include something here in the show notes. We'll make it available so you can download. We've got lots of checklists on different things, so we'll make that available for anybody who's interested in it. But um, Josh, tell us. Maybe we've got a couple of minutes, but maybe you could give us a little bit of an overview of what are you doing these days? Where do you spend your time? What are you putting your passion into?
Yeah, sure. So my company's founder scale, put a lot of time and passion into that. And the focus there is we help businesses go from founder revenue to scalable revenue.
Yep.
The majority of those are B2B, professional services organizations where, the founder capped out in sales at some point and they're looking to get, scale up that revenue and make the transition over to sales and marketing teams. So we help in a lot of ways there. And then I'm a father, married, have two boys, and so spend a lot of time with them doing lacrosse and other sports
Cool.
and activities, and so that takes up a good bit of time as well.
Yeah, nice, nice. It's yeah, it's nice to have, you've done the cycle, right? You've started the business, you grew it, you exited, you some may say you're a bit crazy to jump back on the merry-go-round and go around again, and other people would be,
Right.
and I've done it
Yeah.
myself a few times, so I recognize a touch of that insanity in other people as well, but it's
Right.
but
Yeah. There's a touch of that there.
but glad you're being able to offer that kind of service and support and mentorship and the sort of things to help other people on their journey. Josh, I'd like to ask you one final question if I could, and I'll get you to answer in a minute, but I'm really curious with entrepreneurs like yourselves how you personally define success, and it is a super broad question. Before you give me your thoughts or feedback on that, can I ask, are you happy if people listening to this want to reach out? Are you happy if they want to connect or contact you in some way, shape, or form?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, you can go to founderscale.com and hit the contact form and just ask for me. You can go to LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Josh Sweeney. So I'm easy to contact there as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, we'll put those links in the show notes as well.
Sure.
People, please, if you do reach out, maybe give a little note for Josh, knowing that you're letting him know you heard him on the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast, just so he has a little bit of context as to where you're coming from. But and that'll make it a little bit easier for him. But yeah, so Josh, yeah, I mean, if we can wrap up, I mean, is there a definition? What's your view on success, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I think it changes over the years. I mean, one aspect of success is, do I wake up every morning, excited about solving the challenges that I'm solving, especially on the business side, and then having the time freedom to do the other things that I would like to do, personally, professionally with my family. So, that's the ultimate success, is like
Mm,
being excited about what you do every day and there's a passion for it. My wife has always asked, like she used to ask, "Are you working?" And I'm like, "No, I'm never working. I don't know what you're talking about." So there's a little crazy in there, but really enjoy it.
yeah,
Um, my latest, is, you know, how much larger can I grow this organization and how much faster and larger can I grow it than the last one?
yep,
So that's just more of success of, it's not really about the number, it's more about the personal growth.
yeah.
So, that's personal growth is a big part of how I factor in my success as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing it. I mean, I hear what I'm hearing there is there's a sense of purpose, but there's maybe a sense of balance of the different elements of your life as well, which is cool and certainly something I can relate to. So, um, Josh, looks like we're out of time here, mate. But thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, and I know our listeners will get a lot of value from the discussion. So, thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We will be putting out some additional tools for this episode. So anyone who wants to download those or you need access to other checklists or if you need any help with anything, look, please feel free to reach out. We're very happy to share. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.